A lot has changed about gaming in the last half decade or so. We've seen new systems, games and tech like VR. We've had a surge in indie development. Once edgy trailblazers like Rockstar Games have gone about as mainstream as you can get. But one thing that hasn't changed is that government bodies still like to ruin our fun, and banning and censoring games is still a thing. Hello and welcome to Ricky Robbins' Top 10 Banned and Censored Video Games. Number 10, Silent Hill. These horror classics have been seeing issues from day one, with the first game suffering cuts outside the USA to swap out the grey child monsters from the school level with some completely new creatures called mumblers. This is utterly ridiculous because mumblers don't go to school and children do, so this should never have been changed. To add insult to injury, Silent Hill Homecoming, which many would argue was not the most impactful entry in the series to begin with, was further blunted in Australia and Germany when some gory sequences were toned down. On at least one occasion, this even created some continuity issues, so you know you're improving a game when that happens. You could even argue that PT, which is technically still a Silent Hill game, was self-censored by publisher Konami since they pulled it from the PlayStation Store and wiped it from their servers. Now mind you, this series isn't Resident Evil, there's not like 30 games to pick from. Not counting the handhelds, there's only 9, and that's including both PT and the spin-offs. So that's literally a third of the entire series that's had its integrity interfered with. And don't get me started on the HD collection. Number 9, Hotline Miami 2. This one makes the list as it features a scene of implied rape that got it completely banned within Australia. What's concerning about this is that it doesn't so much feature a scene of rape as it does a scene in which the game characters are filming a movie, and within that context there's about to be a rape, even then it doesn't actually occur. Now this game has the graphics of an NES title and was released in 2015, and since Australia now has an 18+ rating category, if all of that isn't enough to mitigate the problem to at least something that's appropriate for an 18-year-old, then something's seriously wrong. Like, it's fine for I Spit in Your Grave or A Clockwork Orange to have uncut releases there. That's not sarcasm, movies shouldn't be banned either. I just love to know what these people were dropping when they decided that Hotline Miami 2's quote-unquote rape scene was somehow more harmful than any of the harrowing instances across quite a lot of cinema. Number 8, The Punisher. I really love The Punisher. Back in the day, this game, along with The Warriors and San Andreas, were my go-to games to kill some time. You can also kill some people in this game, and torture them, and this proved too much for everyone besides basically PC modders. The game was censored worldwide, with new filters and camera angles reducing the impact of the interrogations, and the more brutal executions would appear less frequently. Even in the censored version, it's still quite a brutal game. Could even be argued that the way the censorship's used actually increases the impact in some cases. Number 7, Mortal Kombat. The great granddaddy of controversial games, the original Mortal Kombat is one of the reasons that the rating system even exists. The violence seen in the fatalities was absolutely shocking at the time, and the series has just upped the ante with each installment. The 9th game in the series was initially banned outright in Australia for its violence and gore, and the rating system needed to be overhauled before it was allowed on the shelves. You know you're doing alright when you make Freddy and Jason look like the least creative killers in your game series. Number 6, Fallout 3. While Fallout 3 isn't too outrageous by the standards of this list, it did manage to upset a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons, and if you ask me, that's what this top 10 is all about. The game's quite violent, but nobody really seemed to care about that. In Australia, the government took issue with the real-world drugs in the game, especially morphine, which was then changed to Med-X. The Indian government took issue with the two-headed cows in the game, and the Japanese government took issue with the nukes in the game, which, that one's probably fair enough. It got a censored release worldwide, and an even more heavily censored release in the latter two countries, but the game's still very enjoyable. Number 5, Postal. Where to begin with this one? Well, I could begin with the fact that you get 10 years in prison for playing this in New Zealand, where it's banned. It's a crude and violent, often offensive series. It's out and out banned in many countries. In fact, they usually don't even bother to censor this one, they generally just pull it all together. However, the situation could be worse if this was released on consoles. Due to its status as a PC-only title, it's gone under the radar a little bit. For example, you can get it at the Steam store in Australia, where the game is also banned. Number 4, Left 4 Dead 2. While only censored in Germany and Australia, they did a real butcher's job on this one. Almost all of the gore is removed. The fact that you're not really killing anyone because, you know, zombies, they're obviously already dead, that's why they're zombies, didn't make any difference. The carnage needed to be cleaned up, so I present to you Left 4 Dead 2, the Australian version. The version where the apocalypse is cleaner than Mr. Sheen. Number 3, South Park The Stick of Truth. One of the only games to be censored all across Europe, and with an extra special Australian version that still carries an 18+ rating. This game really ruffled some feathers when the Alien Anal Probe minigame was deemed to be a child rape, which I guess technically is true. The developers got around this by including a graphic and detailed description of the sequence, but at this point this type of thing's really just par for the course with South Park. Number 2, Manhunt. Manhunt 1 seems made for this list. It's a brutal, realistic, stealth serial killer game where you play as a serial killer killing other serial killers. The more vicious the kills, the more points you get. This one actually makes The Punisher look like a Disney game. Then Manhunt 2 came out and added even more carnage. Needless to say, the censors were not happy in either case. The first game copying various bans that are upheld to this day in some countries, and the second game has some of the highest degrees of censorship I've ever seen. They may as well have cut to a blank screen, it is that bad. Number 1, Grand Theft Auto. While pretty much as mainstream as you get today, there was a time when this series was the be-all and end-all for controversy. You can pretty much take your pick when looking at controversial elements. You've got the killing hookers to get your money back from GTA 3 and Vice City. You've got your hot coffee from San Andreas. You've got your hidden swearing cheat codes as far back as GTA 1. You've even got reduced gore in the Australian copies of GTA 4. And that's not to say anything about what actually did make it into some of these games. It's certainly not the most violent series out there, but in terms of sheer mainstream notoriety and media attention, I think few would argue that it takes the crown of the most controversial. Well, that's the list. Thank you for watching, and until next time, sayonara.